Albania was the only country in Europe to emerge from the Second World War with a larger Jewish population than before the war. This is because the Albanian people protected and sheltered Jews reaching the country from all over occupied Europe, fleeing the atrocities of the Nazi regime and its supporters. As testified by survivors and historians alike, many Albanian families risked their lives for this noble mission. It was a cold November night in Germany, 1938, as Johanna Neumann recalls.
The story really starts with the Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night, in Germany in 1938, November 1938, when the synagogues were burned down and Jewish stores were destroyed. And it was really at that point that my father, who until then could simply not believe that Germany would go against its Jews. He had been an officer in the First World War. There had been Germans for generations. And it was very hard, not only for him, I would think probably for most German Jews, to believe that such a thing could ever happen at all. After Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night, he finally came to the realization that there was really no other way out except to leave Germany.
My little sister, 3.5 years old, was killed, and my mother was killed, grandmother was killed. We, rest of the family, were rescued. We stayed some few days more in Sarajevo. After the funeral, we came back to Belgrade. In Belgrade, there were Germans already present. They occupied the city. They ruled the city. They imposed all the limitations for the Jews. We were obliged to wear the yellow band, yellow track, and we were not allowed to go to school. We were, the men were taken to forced labor, so were the women. It was impossible to move anywhere without being watched or checked, or so. There were checkpoints at every corner.
Hala jeme ishte disa vjeçe ishte, mas shumë vështirësi na lini një vajzë. Edhe atë në masi kur u bë ajo vajza 2 vjeçe, erdhi kjo puna e Gjermanit që je internoi. Kur e internuan atë, se filluan pastaj me i nda fëmit nga prindrit, e kur ja morën hallostime vajzën nga dora, që ajo me zje kishte pa atë fëmijë mas sa vjetëve martes, ajo hala ime e shkreta, u çmend. Filloi me bërtit edhe morën, e kush e di që ai kanë bë, u çmend. Si që tregojnë njerëzit, iku mendja pri mërzis vajzës. Edhe ishte një vajzë që edhe vetë gjermanët i thojshin pupushen, kaq fëmijë i bukur ishte.
Jews lived in Albania and Kosovo working as merchants, doctors and craftsmen. In Albania, there are still Jewish quarters to be found in cities such as Tirana and Vlora, where they had synagogues. In Elbasan, there are still the remains of the Jewish market. Before the Holocaust, there were only 200 Jews living in Albania. During World War II, another 2,000 arrived. In Pristina, Kosovo's capital, the synagogue was built at the end of the 19th century, and the Jewish bazaar was the most famous in this part of the Balkans. Apart from their native languages, the Jews of Albania and Kosovo also learned Albanian, Turkish and Serbian. Hounded and persecuted throughout continental Europe, Jews found a rare safe haven in Albania.
Këto janë fjalët e saj. Ne tha erdhëm në Shqipëri me dokumenta falso. Dhe aty në kufi ata e kuptuan që dokumentat tona ishin falso, megjithatë na lejuan që të futeshim. Dhe babai im thot, mori me qira një kal, na hypën e fëmijëve të vegjël edhe filluam të hecnim me rrugë pa rrugë derisa arritëm në një fshat të humbur. Dhe atje morëm me qira një shtëpi shumë të vjetër. Në mes të natës, sot, dëgjuan trokitje të dera. Dhe menduan se ishin gjermanët. Na hiku gjaku, menduan që ky ishte fundi. Megjithatë e hapën derën dhe pan aty një fshatar me gomar. Ai fshatari, o malsori, ju hodhi një thes me miell dhe pa thënë asnjë fjalë, hiku u zhduk në errësirë. Dhe unë tha, ai thesi me miell na shpëtoi jetën. Dhe kjo gjë na ka ndodhur gjatë gjithë kohës që kemi jetuar në Shqipëri.
I mean, whenever a person in need would knock to a door of a villager in the middle of the night, and he would see that there is a family who needs help, he would bring them in, feed them, give them their bed, and shelter them, and calm them down. You'll be sure that, rest assured that something first will happen to me. They first kill me, and then they will touch you. These were the words that every one of us heard.
Ikëm prej Mitrovice në Prishtinë. Na ndihmoi një familje kosovare që unë isha 10 vjeçë, atëherë unë nuk e mbaj mend as emrin as kur gjë. Na çoi në një nga fshatrat e Kosovës. Atë kam parasysh gjithmonë ato ulurimat e qejve, ajo dbora në kam me ec. Ishte vështirë shumë, po njeriu qa nuk ban për të shpëtu kokën.
The London newspaper, Jewish Daily Post, wrote on the 14th of July 1935, "It has been a month since the Albanian diplomats in Europe have been implementing the order received from King Zog's government to issue as many Albanian passports to Jews wanting to go and live in Albania." According to the documents of the State Archive in Tirana, the Albanian king, Zog I, invited Jews to come to Albania as early as the 1930s in order to assist the development of the country with their expertise. Most of them obtained Albanian visas, and some were even issued Albanian passports. In 1935, Albert Einstein benefited from Albanian hospitality to transit from Europe to America. He stayed in Durrës for 3 days in the royal mansion, and then, equipped with an Albanian passport, continued his journey towards the free world.
Orders from King Zog were to the custom officers, whatever, the police at the borders, not to check Jews, just to let them come in. At any rate, we were fortunate to have visas, and as we found out, we were the only ones that had visas. Everybody else had come, indeed, through Yugoslavia on probably vacation, pretenses of being on vacation to Albania. And when we arrived in March, I think it was March 1st, 1939, much to our own surprise, we were received by other immigrants and found out that there were something like about 60 other Jews from Austria already there.
During the war, Albania and Kosovo were initially under Italian occupation. The local Albanian government utilized its authority to the maximum by refusing to hand over lists of Jews to the German forces. The Jews found shelter in many Albanian households in cities, but when the threat grew too high from the occupying forces' frequent checkpoints, the Jews would go to the mountains pretending to be local shepherds. According to some, Besa, the Albanian sworn oath, with its duty towards guests, was one of the main reasons Albanians helped Jews in need.
Dëgjoja shpesh nga imat këto historirat e shpëtimit e ebrenjve, po çdo gjë më kalonte kështu afër pranë veshit, sepse për mua më duke gjëja më e zakonshme, nëse ti ke një mik dhe ke një shok dhe ti je në rrezik, nuk diskutoj që ai duhet të të shpëtoj. Dhe kjo nuk isha vetëm unë që e mendoja kështu si një gjë të zakonshme, po të shkosh edhe të intervistosh ata shqiptar që sot janë shumë të moshuar dhe që kanë shpëtuar ebrenjë dhe ti pyesësh ata pse e bëre këtë, fjala e parë që del nga goja e tyre është kjo është gjë më e natyrshme. Nuk mendoj që mund të jetë ndryshe.
When several hundred Jews from German-occupied Mitrovica in Kosovo were deported to concentration camps in Serbia and later to Austria and Germany, the local authorities started to transfer Jews secretly to Albania. There, they could move more freely, and the remote Albanian mountains and isolated villages provided a safe haven for hundreds of Jewish families.
I had some little experience that I remember. As a little boy, I just went out of our apartment and went out to play on the streets. There was a field of wheat out there, and I was intrigued by the beauty of the wheat as it grows. It was big and plump, and so I went down to the field and took a plume of wheat and looked at the grains, how they grow, how big they are. The farmer noticed it, an old man who was on the field, and came to me and said, "You see, we have guests here, and this is why God sent us a very nice crop this year."
At the time, the Albanian Prime Minister Mustafa Krya wrote to the successor of the Italian king in Tirana, Francesco Giacomoni, and asked him to help in transferring the Jews from Kosovo to Albania, where they could be more protected.
Krya actually went to Giacomoni. Giacomoni is the viceroy in Albania. At this point, he is still in charge. Obviously, the Germans had not occupied Albania yet in 1941. And he went to Giacomoni and he told him, this is what we're doing. We're distributing these Jews among the Albanian people, etc., gave them papers and names, and so on. And Giacomoni said, go right ahead. I will not report this to Rome, and we have done this in some cases ourselves in Italy.
On the 5th of April 1942, 100 Jewish families from Kosovo arrived in Berat, Albania, and 195 individuals went to Kavaja, Albania. A number of Jews were placed in Kruja, Tirana, Fier, Shijak, Shkodra, and elsewhere, the majority of them being employed in local shops, manufacture, and agriculture. In Berat, 38 Albanian families sheltered about 600 Jews arriving from 1942. From Dalmatia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Macedonia came 350 Jews, and over 400 from Greece. According to the Albanian Kanun, the code of conduct, the Albanian household belongs both to God and the guest.
Në një familje shkodrane, që quhet Shaqir Borici, ky ishte bakall edhe ky më pyet mu një ditë, po ti më i vajz, pse merresh me këto biskota, pse i bjen ti këto biskota? Edhe unë si punë fëmish i diftova të vërtetën që neve kështu jena të ardhur, nuk jena prej këtu, kena ardhur kështu, edhe jena të mshehur nga Gjermani. A i e mori vesh edhe në ndihmoi shumë, edhe kur kishte nevojë, kur s'kishte nevojë i blente biskotat. Edhe na ka strehu në kishte shtëpi shkodranëve të madhe në Çardak, edhe kishte një dhomë që e kishte lënë dispozicionin ton, edhe aty rishim si të mshehur, se ato na e mbajshin sekretin, si fëmijë, si një vajzë u bë shoqe me mu, se ishte moshatare me mu, edhe ato na kanë ndihmuar shumë, derisa u çliru vendi, pastaj s'kishim nevojë më me mshef.
Ne në shtëpinë tonë kishim edhe një histori tragjike. Motra e babait tim ishte martuar në Korfuz. Korfuzi është një nga ishujt e Greqisë. Ajo ishte një vajzë e re, 25 vjeç, ishte martuar me 2 fëmijë të vegjël dhe në korrik të 44-s, do të thënë në prag të mbarimit të luftës, Korfuzi u pushtua nga gjermanët dhe vetëm 7% e komunitetit ebraik të Korfuzit u kthye gjallë nga kampet e përqendrimit. Do të thënë 93% e komunitetit thjesht u zhduk. Ajo ishte një vajzë e re, e bukur, gjyshi im dërgoi dikë nga Shqipëria në Korfuz që t'i thoshte hajde, se ne në Shqipëri kemi miq dhe mund të jesh e sigurt, dhe ajo i tha që unë nuk mund të vi se burri im dhe familja e burrit tim dhe njerëzit të cilëve unë u përkas janë këtu dhe nuk pranoi të vinte dhe dihet fundi i saj tragjik. Do me thënë, e kishim këtë eksperiencë tragjike në familje, por unë personalisht e kuptova këtë gjë vetëm kur erdha në Izrael.
In Albania, some of the Jews were provided with personal documents giving them local Albanian names in order to hide their true identity from the Italian police and military. Yet it must be stressed that the Italians in Albania were not enthusiastic in chasing the newly arrived Jews. This situation changed at the end of 1943, after Italy's capitulation and the arrival of German forces. But by this time, the will of the Albanian people to protect the Jews also grew stronger.
Të parët, domethënë ata që ishin më pleq shkuan në prefektur, u takuan me prefektin dhe ai qetësoi dhe I tha, mos keni frikë për asgjë, se në qoftë se marrin ju, do na marrin neve përpara, pasandaj ju. Pra, ndihma e popullit shqiptar, e popullit vlonjat, ka qenë e jashtëzakonshme për neve e brejtë e Vlorës.
Again, everybody knew we were Jewish. The Germans were all over the place. We had other immigrants who lived in other parts of Tirana, and nobody ever was threatened or was denounced to the Germans. It was just understood that we were Albanians, and that was it.
There are two main pillars to explain this level of protection for Jews in Albania. First, it was the Albanian people's solidarity with the Jewish refugees. And second, the friendly attitude of the Albanian authorities, in particular during the period of King Zog I and the Prime Minister Mehdi Frashëri. An agreement negotiated and signed between Prime Minister Frashëri and the German forces allowed Albania to pursue its internal affairs unhindered. In this framework, this government extended its responsibility for the protection of Jews as well.
Por sa erdhën gjermanët në Shqipëri, që okupuan Shqipërinë, e që simbas deklaratave të ishin kalimthi në Shqipëria, domethënë nuk ishin okupator. Dhe kjo do ishte arsyeja që marrëveshja ndërmjet gjermanëve dhe shtetit kuisling shqiptar që mos të prekeshim neve, domethënë që shteti shqiptar ishte I lirë të bënte çfarë të deshte, domethënë kishte kompetencat e veta.
I recall very clearly that some of the Yugoslavian Jews built their own boats out of wooden rowboats. They put outdoor motors on them and tried to escape to Italy. At this point, already part of Italy had capitulated to the Allies, so they could go to Bari and to Brindisi. Whether any of them ever made it or not is something that I certainly never found out. But again, the Pilku family came through every evening, and I accompanied them several times, would walk along the beach when they had heard that Yugoslavian Jews were trying to board these rowboats, put in provisions so they could survive at sea, and they would make sure that there would be no German control. Now, this is the end of the summer of '43 already.
Most of the Jews in Kosovo were saved by the solidarity of the Albanian people and the mayors of Pristina, Hussein Pristina and Riza Drini, who did not allow the Jews to be handed over to the fascist occupying regime, organizing their safe transfer to Albania, where they were awaited in sheltering hearths. We must also mention Prenk Uli, the secretary of Pristina district, who during World War II himself organized the safe passage of 52 Jews from Pristina to Albania.
Those that they could not place fast enough, they put into a hospital in Pristina and said it was under quarantine because there was typhoid fever. And of course the German soldiers did not dare walk into that hospital. And those people were all safe because of the quick action of somebody like Mr. Kruja.
The defeat of fascism in Europe meant a return to the homes the Albanian Jews had fled from years before. Some went to Israel after the war, invited by the Israeli authorities, but several dozen remained in Albania, where they had already established their families. Today, there are 10 Jewish families still living in Albania. George Kona, a Christian whose parents saved Elena Mosiu's Jewish family, married Elena after the war, and only in 1992 moved to Israel, where they live to this day.
Violence Njëra nga vajzat e Lena u rrit dhe vazhdonte fakultetin në Tiranë, fakultetin e gjuhëve të huaja për anglisht. Frekuentonte rregullisht familjen time, si miq që mbetëm, edhe kjo miqësi u forcu më shumë kur u bë lidhja martësore midis meje dhe kësaj vajze.
Elena's cousins were among the only Jews in Albania to be deported and killed as a result of their communist beliefs, not their race.
Për fat keq, familjes babait tim do më thënë gjëllakëve të mi ndodhi kjo gja, megjithëse në Shqipëri të gjithë ebrejt mujtën me shpëtu për shkak të ndihmës madhe që i dha populli shqiptar, që të gjithëve. Fati i tyne i keq, edhe joni gjithashtu që të ngelim pa njerëz të afër të familjes tonë.
Each Jew felt sorrow upon leaving the people who had saved their lives and had treated them as members of the family. Many stories have been written about these noble actions of the Albanians, whose names are now carved on the memorial in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem.
Vetëm frika gjithmonë ekzistonte. Frika gjithmonë ekzistonte. Se mos në një ditë të mirë do na merrnin e do na internonin.
And I have to tell you, when I think about it, that feeling of fear never leaves you. That feeling of fear I can feel to this day. There's always the fear that somehow they would find out and we would, we would be caught by the Germans. Well, God was good, the Albanian people were good, and we were safe.
More than 60 years have passed since the end of the Holocaust, but the heroism and humanity of the Albanian righteous among the nations will always be remembered by the survivors and their descendants alike. Mrs. Irene Grunbaum, one of the most famous Holocaust survivors, recounts her memories in Albania with these words. Goodbye, Albania. You offered us so much hospitality, shelter, friendship, and adventure. Goodbye, Albania. One day, I shall tell the whole world about how brave, loyal, and generous your sons are, putting their lives on the scale of death in order to save ours.
Kur kam qenë, mund të them, në moshën 5 vjeç, kam qenë në rrugë me maman time, ecnim dorë me dorë, dhe dëgjoj një zë nga larg dhe thëriste bule, bule. Unë ktheva kokën dhe rrugica shumë e vogël, shumë e ngushtë dhe nuk ishte asnjëri tjetër përveç nesh. E marr maman nga fustani, the mama, është një grua këtu mbrapsh që vërtet bule, unë nuk shoh asnjëri tjetër. Mama ime kthen kokën e shikon këtë gruan dhe që të dyja fillojnë të qajnë, fillojnë të përqafohen dhe unë mbeta. Nuk e kuptoja pse kjo gruaja e thiri maman time bule. Bule ishte emri i mamas time në fshat. Emri saj ka qenë Nina, emri izraelit, por emri saj shqiptar ka qenë Bule. Kjo është një histori e vogël që kur e kujtoj më rëngjithet mishi, sidoqoftë, kjo është një shenjë që shqiptarët shpëtuan izraelitët dhe ata të tre vllazërit ka qenë shumë njerëz bujar.
And as the saying goes, whoever saves one human life is as though he saves a whole nation. The fact is that if you want to take a picture of what it means to save one life, these are my children and grandchildren and great-grandchild, which wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for Albania.